share my screen. Okay. I'm up, right? Can you see me? Am I shared?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I am going to get started because if you've ever been to one of my presentations before, I have like 1,000 slides filled with nonsense. So we have to get through all of them in an hour. But this is social media for small libraries. And okay, so just a little bit of who am I and what am I doing here? Mostly I'm here because I submitted a proposal and it was accepted. And originally I was from Long Island. I started as a children's librarian at the Henry Waldinger Library in Valley Stream. And now I am up in Rochester. So I live in Monroe County, which is the little pink inside the circle, but I work in the Pioneer Library System, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then I also worked in some libraries in the Philadelphia area, and I felt like I could not do a presentation without having a slide of Gritty. But Pioneer Library System, so we serve and support the 42 public and association libraries in Ontario, Wayne, Wyoming, and Livingston County. So we kind of like come across this way in between the Finger Lakes and like Rochester, Buffalo. So I always say we're like the little scarf that keeps Western New York warm. Our service area kind of covers 2,500 square miles. Our smallest library is 300. It serves a population of 330, and our largest serves a population of 26,000. But our average library is about it kind of falls into like that 2,000 to 8,000, service area. So that's kind of like what, the system that I'm working in, the system that I now serve, and the libraries that I worked in. So a lot of what is in today's presentation is going to be geared towards libraries of that size. And so social media, so I remember in like 2006, 2007, MySpace was becoming really big. And at the time, some libraries were kind of going into it a little bit, but, at the time, social media still wasn't taken very seriously. And then I remember being at the 2008 ALA Midwinter, and they were like, so guys, there's this thing called Twitter that you really need to get on. But at that point, again, like social media was still, like, what is this? Is this going to be here? Does this have longevity? Can anyone take us seriously if we're a library on social media? And then at that point, a lot of libraries were like, well, we'll just blog. So they all started blogs. So I think in the beginning, libraries were a little bit slower to get on social media. Not all of them, but especially maybe the ones too in smaller and rural areas where maybe traditionally and even now there was like broadband and internet issues. But I think now, especially now during COVID, it's become really important that this is where we need to be. We need to be creating these virtual spaces and meeting our patrons where they are, or our community members where they are. But what got me first kind of interested, or like more interested in what social media could do for small libraries, is when I moved to the Rochester area and I was looking for a library job. I took a job working at Flea Feet, which is a locally owned running store. And this was at the time where this was like 2011. And this is where everyone was like, brick and mortar retail is dead. It's all mom and pop shops are dying. It's all Amazon. It's all Zappos. And so at that time, all of us working at this running store, and that's me in the middle when I had bangs. So in that picture on the right. So, but at the time, everybody was like at the store was like, well, how can we meet people online and create a community online, but then generate that to people coming to the store? And we turned to social media for that. And we were using Facebook really heavily. And we were basically like, let's share our tips, our knowledge, our expertise. We'll answer questions, very similar to what we're doing in libraries. And instead of people, like engaging with us on Facebook, but then buying their stuff on Zappos and Amazon, it did translate into them coming to group runs and coming to stores, coming to the store to purchase. And so what we were seeing, this community online was building into like people coming into the store, and it was driving traffic into the store. So a couple of years later, instead of our like tiny little brick and mortar store dying, we ended up having to move into a 10,000 square foot space. Our group runs, which were like 50 people, turned into 100 people, turned into 250 people on a Saturday. And then we were, in 2014, we were a top 50 running store in America, and we made it to the Final Four. So a couple years later, when I translated back into the library world, I kind of took these lessons with me. Like, if we could do this in a store, we could do this with libraries. And those likes and shares and comments on Facebook, it could turn into door counts, and it could turn into program attendance, and it can turn into circulation statistics. But I think the problem is with small libraries, it feels a little bit daunting, because then you're like, I want to learn more about social media. What can I do with social media? And sometimes you attend, like, especially like much bigger conferences, like national conferences, they'll have sessions on social media, but they're run by professional social media managers. So like, that's all they do. And so they have time to really hone their craft and follow the trends and learn all the new tools. Or sometimes it can be run by a library, the program session, but they have a social media team. So maybe there's 3, 4, or 5 of them that are able to run the library's social media account. And when you are a small or rural library, you don't really have that. Like, maybe you're the only person on staff, or maybe there's only 3 of you on staff, or maybe there's 5 of you, but only one of you is really comfortable with technology or social media. So, you know, sometimes I think it gets a little bit overwhelming, or it gets a little bit daunting for small libraries with a smaller staff to use social media and start implementing social media. So then I started to think, well, how can we take everything that I'm learning and make it scalable and make it sustainable for the small libraries that I was working in, and also, you know, facing limited time, personnel, and definitely money. So this is like my $0 social media budget presentation. So you can do stuff on social media, and you could use the tools that I'm going to talk about today with $0. So basically, this presentation is like my who, what, where, when, why, and how. You know, I'm not an expert. I have to wear many, many hats, you know, at the library and now at the Pioneer Library System. But I found some stuff that does work for me. So I'm going to share it all with you today. And if you could pull some nuggets out of this presentation and bring it to your library, then I feel like, you know, it was hopefully worth your time. So when we talk about social media, it's big. There's a lot out there. This is not an exhaustive list. This is probably like the most popular, the most well-known platforms that are out there. But today, when I'm talking about social media, I'm primarily going to be talking about Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. YouTube is also really big, and it became really, really big with libraries during COVID shutdowns. But that could probably be its very own conference session, so I'm not really going to talk about that today. So where should you post? So I recommend, if you're only going to do one social media platform, go with Facebook. Facebook is still king. Currently in the US, there's 2.2 million Facebook users. So if you're going to do one, that's the one to pick. But if you're going to start using Facebook more, you want to use your existing accounts. Don't leave here today and start, you know, creating accounts across multiple platforms. If you have a Facebook and you have an Instagram and you're not using them so much now, just use those accounts for now. And then, you know, if you get a handle on it and you want to expand out, go from there. You have to consider your sustainability. So like, what can you realistically maintain? Can you only have one social media account? That's fine. Just do that one account and do it well. The next thing to consider is, who is your audience? So whenever you're posting or whenever you're creating content, you want to consider, you know, who is your audience? What do you want? And what does your audience need? You know, so you always want to post on a variety of topics. You don't want to post on the same things over and over again, because your audience isn't the same person over and over again. But the other thing to really consider is what your audience needs. So during coronavirus, we all found that, you know, our community members, our Facebook users, they wanted information, they wanted resources, they wanted connection, they wanted entertainment, they wanted distraction. And so I would curate like all of our Facebook posts based on that. So just think about all the different things that your community needs, and then decide who your audience is, and that will kind of help shape what your social media plan is going to be. So what? The big question I always get is like, I don't know what to post. What should I post? And finding content seems to be the biggest struggle. So this is coming up. These slides are going to be like the meat and potatoes of the presentation. But there's a lot of different things that you could use. So these are kind of like my categories of what I post. I don't post all of these categories every single day, but this is just kind of like where I pull from. So, and we're going to go through each of these, but you have your original content, branded content, your vendor marketing tools, stuff from professional organizations, community and government organizations, calls to action and causes, publishers, authors, book-related websites and blogs, pop culture memes and jokes, and quotes. So as far as the original content, this is just stuff that you kind of create or you make up. It's not something that you shared or like reposted from someplace else. And these tend to engage the users a lot. So where other content you post, you might just get like a like, you know, or a love. You know, if you like post original content like open-ended questions, what did you read this weekend, you tend to get a little bit more comments and you'll see a little bit more engagement. Use these sparingly. If you do it every single day, people kind of get, I think, a little tired of it. But if like once a week, it's like what's on your to be read pile this weekend, you'll find that you'll get a lot of comments and people starting engaging with your posts. Teasers are always really fun too. Like, oh, guess who's coming to do our summer reading program this year? Guess what, you know, entertainer. And then also just pictures, you know, instead of stock photos, using displays, you know, pictures of displays from around the library, programs, you know, new materials like unboxing Baker and Taylor books. You know, people always like that a lot. And then pictures of your actual staff, people love. So we posted this when we had our Alley Awards a couple weeks ago, and people loved it. Usually our posts, especially because we're a system, right? So when we're not, you know, all of our libraries are independent. So I feel like I'm pushing content pretty much out to the libraries. But for a library system in a small area, this post had 71 likes. It reached 683 people. It had, you know, shares and comments. Usually our posts will have like, you know, 12 likes and like a couple shares, and it reaches maybe like 100 people. So this post blew up, I think, because it was a fun post, but also we just showed our staff and we showed our staff having fun. So make sure that you're including pictures like that, like real pictures of your library and your people on your social media posts. So the other thing I post a lot is branded content, and I create all of this stuff in Canva. Some people love Canva, some people hate Canva. I love Canva. I think it's easy to use. You can use the free version. I create everything in like that Instagram square size, so like that, you know, it's like 1080 by 1080 px. So, you know, and if you go to Canva, just say I want it Instagram size. The reason I create everything that size is that I find it drops into like multiple social media platforms really easily. I don't have to resize. I don't have to play with the formatting. If you want to use the same graphics for like a MailChimp newsletter, you can drop it in there. You can drop it on your website. So that just seems, because for my time, I don't have time to create, you know, a Facebook size and you know, a Twitter size and something for, you know, my newsletter. So just making everything this one standard size that I can post across all platforms works really, really well for me. And then always put your logo on what you do. You know, be proud of the original content that you created, and slap your logo on it. And again, it's just a chance for people to see your logo, especially if community members are sharing it. So for your vendor marketing tools, like don't forget about all those vendors that you use, you know, Libby, Mango, Ancestry, any of those companies. If you scroll to the bottom of their website, they always either have like a media kit, marketing resources. They all kind of call it something different, but they have, and Libby is great and Overdrive is great. They change it seasonally. Sometimes they have new stuff up weekly. So always check their website and just scroll down. And I'll save they'll do like the Facebook size, the Twitter size, the Instagram size. I always just save the Instagram size again, so I could just take one picture and post it across all of our platforms and not have to worry. It's just a time saver for me. But don't forget about these companies to help promote these resources that you're paying for. Your professional organizations, so NYLA, ARSL, ALA, just share what they're posting, share their resources. And what I think is that it helps connect your small library community to like that larger library world too. So follow your professional organizations on social media, or again, go to their websites and go for their media kits and pull any graphics or initiatives and repost them to your social media. Community and government organizations, this one really became important during COVID because our patrons needed to know, where could we go to get emotional help? Where can we go to get food? Where could we go for testing? How do we find out more? So we were constantly posting things from, the CDC, the New York Department of Health, the New York Department of Aging, and just any kind of resources like that that we could push out. We were pushing out a couple of times a day. Usually I'll post about 3 times a day. During coronavirus, at the peak of it, I was probably posting up to 5 times a day, and we were still getting, likes and shares and follows. So people weren't sick of it. They were really, I think, thirsty for information. Now that things somewhat regulated, I'm back to our 3 times a day. But those community and government organizations don't take for granted that just because someone in your community is following the library, that they're also following like the food bank and the Department of Health, because they might not be. So if you see that information, share it out to your community. Causes and calls to action. So, voter registration day, the census, library card sign up month, anything like that, post out to your community. Again, just because they're following you, they might not be following all these other organizations, and they might not, know the voting deadline, or know, when they had to get their census in by, or, oh, it's library card sign up month. So just make sure you're pushing all this out and kind of, mobilize your community a little bit more. Just remember to include any relevant links or any relevant information in the text. So don't say, go vote, but then just leave it there. Maybe include the phone number for the local Board of Elections, or include the link to the Board of Elections, so then they can take those next steps. Publishers and authors. So following publishers and authors on social media is a great way to get content. People get really excited, like the one and only Bob unboxing book. It's, you would just think, oh, it's just books in a box, but people loved it. People were really excited. When Jacqueline Woodson was doing those readings, people were sharing those posts like crazy, and even just like little tips from Scholastic. So, if you follow your favorites, or you follow some, popular authors or publishing houses, and then just share out information that they put, so that you think that your community is going to find interesting. Book related websites and blogs. So, Book Riot's always a really good one, especially around the holidays. They always have like 25 gifts for, readers, and they always have like little fun things, and people always like to share those. But these are websites that I'll go to, and if there's something, I kind of want to post something light and fun, I'll just grab like a blog post or an article from one of these and repost it. Pop culture memes and jokes. So these, sometimes, again, especially during COVID, but all other times, people sometimes just want to laugh. They want to be entertained. All of our posts don't have to be very heavy and serious. So I like to post a fun thing every once in a while. Not so much now that I'm at a system, but when I was at a library posting for the library, I would do a lot of this. But the one thing to remember is you'll never know when your post is going to go viral. So if you do borrow something and you know where it came from, do credit it. Like the Baby Yoda post, I think it was every library had posted it first, and we shared it. And one of our posts, typically for when I was at Clifton Springs, would get like 1 share and maybe a couple likes. And this one, and the reach was be about like 250 people. This post, the Baby Yoda post, had 388 shares, and over 61,000 was our reach. So this,
Wow.
for us, it went like viral, and it was kind of surprising, and it was kind of fun. But so just remember, like, if you do borrow content, make sure you give credit, and then just make sure, you never know. You might think, oh, I'm a little tiny library, no one ever sees our stuff. You never know all of a sudden when your library's content is just being pushed out there. So I always think twice before I post, just like, who's going to see this? And if you are ever totally like, I have no idea what to post, anything with the Scholastic Book Fair, people go wild for. So just Google Scholastic Book Fair joke, and then just take it and throw it up on Facebook, and everyone will be like, I love the Scholastic Book Fair. And then all of a sudden you have a couple more followers to your Facebook page. One thing I started doing this summer, especially on Saturdays, I do want to post, something on Saturday. I don't want to completely disappear for the day, but we find that people are out, weather's nice, it's harder to drive traffic to your library. Maybe they're just going to come pick up their hold, and that's it. So I'll just post, some sort of literary quote or book quote or something that has to do with the season. Sometimes I'll even use like a local background, like Canandaigua Lake, and I'll just throw a quote on top of that, and I just throw it out on Saturday morning and say happy Saturday, and I kind of leave it there. So we still had a consistent post, but if we didn't get any return on that post, it didn't drive door counts or anything, or it didn't drive anyone to our virtual library, that's fine. But we did have a little something. People saw us in their feed that day. And when all else fails, just post a picture of a cat, because people love cats and books and cat book pictures. And then you could even say, if you want to try to get that extra engagement, like show us a picture of your cat. But if you're like, I have to post something, I haven't posted, and just library cat, and then you're all set. So why are you posting? So this is another thing to kind of guide your content and help you decide, what to post on your social media platforms. But always ask yourself, like, what is the purpose? You don't want your community members, your followers, to be like, why is this even here? Like, it has to sort of make sense. So, I would always kind of relate it back to my mission. So if my mission was like, my library's mission is like to inform, educate, and entertain the community. Okay, does this post do one of those three? And most of the times, yes, you can kind of fit it into one of those buckets, but just should make sure what you're posting makes sense for the library to be posting. You want to make sure that your content is relevant, it's accurate, it's useful. And just because you can post something, should you post it? So just always kind of give it that second glance before you actually hit share. Another question I get a lot is, when should I post? And I always say you should at least post once a day. Like, you should just have one thing a day. And that can be sustainable for a lot of people. Even if you are a staff of one, once a day should be something that you're able to do. The sweet spot tends to be 2 or 3 times a day, but that doesn't mean you have to do 2 to 3 times a day. 4 tends to be a lot, and that's like the max of what I would recommend. When I was at a library, I would do 4 times a day. We would do 8, 12, 4, and 8. And we would make sure all of those posts were something different. So one would be promoting a program, one would be, something with the community, something funny, so we would try to make sure we varied what our posts were going to be, but no more than that. Avoid rapid fire posts. So if you get to work at 9 in the morning, you're like, all right, time to do social media. Do not post something at 9, 9:05, 9:07, 9:10, 9:12. That will drive people crazy. I mean, I know that in my personal Facebook, I will unfollow, if there's like an organization or a company and it's just like post in a row, or even like someone in my family who's like posting a lot, like I'll hide them from my feed. So you don't want to like pester people and annoy them. So avoid those rapid fire posts. But you also don't want to ghost your audience. So don't post, you're posting pretty consistently and then all of a sudden you completely disappear for 2 to 3 weeks and then you come back. So you should be consistent. That's why I say, if you only do once a day, that's fine, but be consistent. It should be something that your followers and that your community members can sort of rely on. And it does take a little bit of trial and error to find what times a day tend to work really good for your community. Like I find, if I would post at 8 in the morning, I found when people got to like work at 9, because I know when we all get to work, we secretly check social media first. So and then we would get a lot of engagement at 9. So I would try to get out ahead of that. So just, it's going to take, I would try, if I wanted to try scheduling at a new time, I would try it for like a week or 2. And if it wasn't really working, then I would either go back to a previous time that we used or tried something else. So, you'll find what works for you, but then stick to it once you find that when. So when it comes to posting, people always ask, how do you find the time? I schedule everything. I used to use the Facebook scheduler when I was at Clifton Springs, and I was like, I don't need to use scheduling software. That's too much for me. I'm making it too complicated. And now I kick myself for all the time that I lost not using another scheduler. So I use Hootsuite now at Pioneer. It works really well for me. There is a free version, but if you go to their website, they don't make it obvious that there's a free version. So you have to kind of get into it through the back door. So if you Google like Hootsuite free version, then you can get to the free version and sign up. But if you go to their regular website, it's going to like prompt you for like 3 different things and you have to pay for all of those. So just kind of Google free version and that's how you find it. Again, some people love Hootsuite, some people hate it, some people prefer other publishing tools. It works really, really well for me. Because it has like this grid system. So I used to spend time drawing this grid system out for scheduling all of my Facebook posts through Facebook. And then, I have like the days and I would have the times and like now it's all here for me. So I just click on a box and I schedule the post. I can just pick which social media platforms I want to post to. So if I just want to do Facebook, Twitter, or Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, because we have the 3. And with the free version of Hootsuite, you can have up to 3 social media accounts linked. If you have more than that, or you want to post to more of that, then you need to do the paid version. But we have 3 works for me. And I can schedule up to 30 posts at one time using it. So again, that works really well for me. That's like, if I'm posting on all 3 platforms, 30 posts is it's a lot of days out. And I usually block off 1 or 2 days during the week, like usually Monday afternoons and Thursday afternoons, and I'll just schedule a chunk of social media posts at each time. But then, this is like one of those happy Saturday posts that I was telling you about. So I just drop the media picture in, I select which platforms that I want to post it to, I put my text in, and then you can see at the bottom where you can schedule it, you can change the date, you can change the time, and then I scheduled this one to all 3. And then when I'm done, it shows up in my grid and you can see it under the Saturday morning. So I have found that this saves me so much time. Again, I'm kicking myself for not doing it years ago. So if you're not using a scheduler, I would definitely recommend trying it. Because not only does it like I set everything and then forget it for the next 4 or 5 days, but it does keep me posting consistently because now everything's scheduled out. So it's not like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, oh, I forgot to do a post this morning. Like it was already done for me. I just set it and forget it. So this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about social media policy. This is kind of like the Debbie Downer boring part, but I think it's really important, especially now that a lot of us are using social media a lot more in our libraries. Maybe we were before, but it's definitely heightened during coronavirus. It's become like, these virtual spaces that we're using. And I think it's important that even though social media can be a little bit more casual and loose, that we are libraries, that we do have some sort of parameters and guidelines in place. And according to this survey from OCLC a couple years ago, only 21% of libraries have an external policy, which I think is really important. There's a lot of libraries that do have an internal policy that kind of governs like what the purpose of their social media and like maybe staff usage, but it doesn't have anything for external, like anything for the patrons. And to me, this is no different than having like either like a programming policy or like a code of conduct, because we are doing a lot of like library activities, a lot of library business online now. So I think it's something that libraries should really look at adopting. But just again, with any of your policies, not just social media, and I have to add this in just because I love policy so much, it should be tied to your library's mission. Make sure it's in writing. Make sure it's simple and easy to understand. Like take some of the jargon out of it and make sure, especially with those external policies, that your average library user is able to understand what you're saying. Make sure that you're applying it consistently and objectively. It's on the library's website. Minimum standards by January 1st. All New York libraries have to do this anyway. Make sure you include the final authority. And that's, that little line at the end that said that, the director is in charge of the policy, and that gives you your little wiggle room. Make sure the staff knows all of your policies, especially a social media policy. If you're not the one running your social media, it's designated to a staff member. Make sure that they understand your social media policies and then review and update as needed. But your social media policy, especially that external one, you can link the policy from your platform. So that About Me section on Facebook, you could just drop the link in there and it links to your library's website where that social media policy is. Make sure you're including acceptable behavior, what the moderation and consequences should be, and any kind of like appeals or reconsideration procedure if you do end up having to ban somebody from your Facebook page. Maybe they're doing something pretty abusive, but consult your library system when you're crafting a social media policy. If you are a community that tends to maybe like have had some controversy with social media in the past, or like you're one of those communities where every single person shows up to speak at public comment at your board meetings, you might want to consider having your policy vetted by a lawyer. It's not necessary, but just in the past, if there's been some friction between your community and social media, it might be a good idea. Also, last year at ALA Midwinter, they did a really good session on social media and what's considered like a public forum and what you can and can't delete. So if you can go back and grab that off their website and take a look at it, it was a really interesting session and could definitely help you as you craft social media policy. I do have samples of this. There is going to be a link at the end of this presentation that has, social media policy samples that obviously you would have to, they're just samples. You would have to look them over and see what you could adopt for your library. And then some of the other resources that I've talked about during this presentation will also be in that Google folder. So once you're feeling kind of sort of social media savvy, I definitely would prioritize learning about alt text and learning about designing for accessibility. If your library is inclusive, you want to make sure that the content that you're putting online is also inclusive. So I would say, the sooner you learn about those and start applying them to your posts, the better. There are in that Google folder that's going to be, the link is going to be at the end of this presentation. There are some posters that I put into a designing for accessibility folder. So you take a look at those, and then the link to the full blog post on that where those posters came from is there. So if that's, further reading to make sure that the content that you're creating is accessible to all of your users. At the very least, in the very beginning, when you're starting out, you should be captioning your photos. So don't just like post a photo without any text. I always post a photo and then, our text kind of like either says exactly what's in the photo or like restates what's in the photo, like maybe just the language is slightly different. But, if it says, use our resources on owl.org, the text will also say use our resources on owl.org, because if somebody is using a screen reader and you're not captioning your photos, then your photo is useless to them. So just make sure that you are captioning your photos, and then immediately, if you can, start learning about alt text, designing for accessibility. Once you're feeling a little bit more comfortable, if you want to start using hashtags, I would recommend them for Instagram and Twitter. Also, every couple of years, like Facebook tries to make hashtags like a thing on Facebook, but like nobody really uses them. And, use them sparingly. If you have a block of hashtags at the end of your post, it looks very, very spammy, and people just will scroll right past you because it almost feels like, what are you selling me? So, maybe 1-2 hashtags. Make sure they're hashtags that like other people are like using, instead of just making up your own, especially if you're reposting something that's like a library initiative or something with this conference, right? Everyone's using like the 2020 NILA hashtag. That's fine. Use those. But if you're like hashtag books, hashtag libraries, hashtag reading, hashtag, and like over and over and over again, it's very blocky. It's not very personal. Nobody's using it. It's really not getting you a lot of reach either. So, use them sparingly. You could start to consider data and measurables. So if you want to start looking at how many followers you have or how much, a post, what reach a post had, you could start looking at those. Just remember that not all of your metrics are going to be digital. So you might have a post that went up and you're like, oh, only 3 people liked it, but it also made a whole new family come to your library and get library cards, or 3 new people showed up to story time that week. So maybe you weren't able to see the return online through all those charts that Facebook has on the back end, but it did translate into door counts. So just, so it's good to look at those things, but I wouldn't like hang your hat on those and be like, oh, social media isn't working for us just because like, the bar graph didn't go high that month. Vary your approach. So, you don't have to post the same thing across all 3 platforms, because you'll find that there are different people using Facebook, that are using Instagram, that are using Twitter. So if you have a little bit more time and you're feeling comfortable, you can start to vary what you're posting onto each platform. So there's some things, like usually our first post of the day back to, for PLS, that will go to all 3 platforms. But then later, something might just go to Facebook, or might be scheduled to just Facebook and Twitter. Instagram, I usually just do 1 post a day. I don't worry about posting multiple times. But, we do try to vary it a little bit because there are different users on different platforms. And then if you wanted to try to run promotions or ads, this will cost you money. Like when we would have the book sale coming up at the library, I would run an ad usually for like 14 days and I would just do the $1 a day. So it would be $14, but you could look into like running promotions or ads if you wanted to try to expand, especially for something like a book sale or a fundraiser or a really special event at the library. So some final tips and tricks. Make sure that you keep a master list of your logins and passwords and establish like a best practices and train other staff. And it's really good to have a continuity plan because I know there's a lot of libraries out there that like one person created all the Facebook account, like all the social media accounts, and then they left and nobody had that information anymore. And then it's like, then they had to create a new one and now there's two out there and then it kind of gets weird. So just make sure that you're keeping a master list of all of this stuff. You want to set personal and professional boundaries. So if you run the library's social media account, you run the Facebook account, that doesn't mean you have to start letting patrons friend your personal account on Facebook, because then what's going to happen is it's going to be 9 o'clock on a Saturday night and it's going to be like, hey, do you know when my hold is coming in? And that's to your personal account. So please set boundaries, and it's okay to not accept friend requests from your community. I mean, if they're like your legit friend in real life, that's okay. But if you don't want to answer library questions on, a Friday night, a Saturday night, first thing on a Sunday morning, make sure you're setting those boundaries. And like your Facebook library account is for that, and then your personal account is your personal account for your own time. You could always borrow content. Where libraries, that's what we do. We like to borrow, but make sure you're giving credit where credit is due. So again, like that Baby Yoda post, like it was a good thing I credited where it came from because it went like viral for us and it wasn't our original content. So it's just important that, and I'll say, oh, our friends at this library, our friends at the fire department, and like whenever I'm sharing content. And then also helps to create a little bit of a relationship too with the organization when you share their post. Make sure that the pictures you use aren't grainy, pixelated, blurry, stretched, or watermarked. Because you're trying to, look a little professional on Facebook, and then like if it's like all like stretched out and you can't really see what it's using. So make sure that you're using higher quality photos if you can find them. When it comes to text, less is more. So something I always do is I'll read our posts out loud. And if I'm like talking for a really, really, really long time, I'm like, I have to edit this post down. We're definitely like in this scroll culture, like people just want to scroll, 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 scroll. And you have a snapshot to get their attention for them to get the gist of what you're saying, the gist of your post. So if it's a big block of text, they're not going to stop and read it unless it's like super, super important. But even like, I know I just scroll, with my thumb, and it takes a lot for me to really like stop. Like I have to be able to like get the information in a quick amount of time. And a lot of people are using social media that way. So if you have a big block of text, edit that down, and reading it out loud helps me because I'm like, wow, I have been talking a really long time. And then I'll take some stuff out. So you could always, and if it's something that's on your website, you could always just post a link and direct them so they can get the full text there. And you're just giving them a highlight or a snapshot on your social media. The other thing is too, if like you're kind of like stumbling over the words, like if they're not flowing real, then maybe you need to edit your text too. So reading it out loud helps with that. You want to be clear and concise. And the best advice, I think, well, I don't know if it's the best, but one of the best advice I heard for social media is it should be like a children's picture book. You want to make it like simple, minimal text, and a clear message. So it should just be like really nice to see, really easy to grab the message and what you're trying to say to your community. Make sure you're using we or the library instead of the first person I, even if you are the only person that works at the library. It's just really weird if it's like, I got a new book in today. Like, the library got this new book in today. Or like, Miss Jenny really loves this new book. So try to speak more like third person, like, or on behalf of the library instead of first person. Like, it would be really weird if like Wegmans was posting like something about their meat department was like, I love these steaks. So just remember that you are an organization and you are posting on behalf of the organization. And again, grammar, punctuation, all that stuff still counts, which is another good thing for reading your post out loud, because that's when you'll find those errors and those typos that you need to fix when you're trying to read your post out loud. Social media is not a substitute for a website. So you can't just Oh, you can't just have a social media page. You have to have a website. Minimum standards, January 1st, you have to have one anyway. But you got to remember that not everybody is on social media. There are people that are fed up with Facebook. They're leaving Facebook, especially around like the holidays or election time. Facebook gets a little crazy and you're kind of sick of fighting with like your uncle. So everyone like leaves Facebook. So just make sure that you still have your library's website. Like your social media should just be like a bonus. Make sure you're protecting patron privacy and confidentiality. You should never, ever be collecting any patron information from Facebook, from social media at all. And then always just remember to keep your posts positive. I have seen from time to time, like where libraries or no one in New York have like sort of scolded their patrons, or if you have to have a friendly reminder, make it a friendly reminder. Keep your language upbeat, keep it positive, keep it light. Don't go to social media where a lot of people do kind of go still to have fun, and then you're like scolding or admonishing your community. So just always keep all of your content, try to frame it in a really upbeat, positive light. So this is that link I was telling you about. If you go to this link, it will take you to a Google folder, and my slides will be in there, those sample social media policies, a further reading list, like a whole bunch of stuff. So, and those posters for designing for accessibility. So those will all be in there. But they're also going to have my slides up on the NYLA website too. So then you could access it that way. But this Google link has all of the resources from today. And that brings us to questions. I got through pretty fast. So now we can do questions.
I'm coming back. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you so much. There's so much information. I'm a social media person. I'm the communication. Okay. I get everything here. So we have a bunch of questions.
All right.
So the first question is, should the library get involved with any paid methods for escalating social media exposure? And this is from Tony from Port Washington.
I think it depends on what your goals are for using social media. I mean, a lot of the communities up here, they're really small, and we're just trying to reach like our immediate communities. I know bigger libraries will use like social listening tools to find out like what's really hot in their community, try to like tap into that and make sure that they're like on, they're on top of the things that are trending within their community members. But I really think it just depends like what your goals are. What's sustainable? Is it just you? Because then maybe, spending a lot of time like trying to reach more people and expand more people, you're kind of ignoring the ones you already have. So I think it's just prioritizing what your library can and wants to do with social media.
Thank you. Our next question is from Jennifer from Greenberg Public Library. Is the square size format just for Instagram? They're more looking for Facebook. So do you recommend different sizes when it comes to making graphics?
So I use the Instagram size for everything. And if you go to our Pioneer Library Systems Facebook page, you'll see it's that square image. And the reason I do that is that Instagram is the pickiest about what it wants for size. So, and then I find that size works really well still with Facebook and with Twitter, and like, again, dropping it into the website or dropping it into a newsletter, that nice square size works really well across multiple platforms. So to save me time, I use that Instagram size instead of resizing something 3-4 different times. I don't have time for that. If I'm a staff of 1 or if I'm a staff of 2 or 3, I just don't have time to make 4 different versions of the same picture. So since that Instagram size works so well across multiple platforms, that's what I go with. So again, it's what you have time for. If you work 35 hours a week and you're able to, maybe put 10 hours of that towards social media, then maybe you could, start playing around with the different sizes.
Yeah, thank you. Our next question is from Heather from the New Woodstock Free Library. Do you have any suggestions for how to gain followers? We started their Facebook and Twitter pages from scratch, and they're having trouble getting followers.
It takes a little bit to get some traction. I think you just have to, first you have to keep plugging away, because a lot of times people are like, well, why aren't we viral yet? And like, no, first of all, like none of us are ever going to go viral. Like we're libraries, and it's like such a weird term. Like, I mean, the Baby Yoda one kind of did, but it was Baby Yoda. But it's just kind of finding that hook. Like you'll find all of a sudden you'll have this one post that for whatever reason, people in your community just start sharing, and it starts, you start getting more and more followers, it starts gaining traction. But definitely be consistent with your posting. So if you post once and then don't post again for 2 weeks, you're not going to gain a following that way. Definitely tapping into what's important to your community. So like even sharing stuff from like the school district or other community organizations, that cross sharing starts to like get people to come. So if somebody, you share something from the school district and someone else shares it, and then it shows up in someone else's feed, like all of a sudden it starts driving people to your Facebook page. So it does take a little bit of hustle at first to get it, but it's just mostly staying consistent and just keep going and keep plugging away. And then all of a sudden you do start to gain some traction with your community. But also make sure that your community knows that you have a Facebook page. So if you have like one of those electronic signs in your library, make sure that that comes up. Maybe can you print it at the bottom of your due date slip? So just make sure that people know about it, because they might not even realize that you're on there.
Yeah, thank you. So Gina asks, how do you handle copyright?
Yeah, so so again, it's hard. So it's hard on social media, right? Like there was a discussion on some library Facebook group last week about like, should you be crediting memes? And everyone's like, no, like memes are just like memes. So for like librarians, I think it's like hard to kind of balance the two, because like it's driven into us like copyright, copyright, copyright. But then there is sort of this like community of sharing online where, it's kind of like anything goes. And some people that create memes do put their like little logo on it, that, and keep it on there, don't crop it out. Some are like, I don't care, just share my stuff. So I just try to make sure I credit whenever I can, but I don't like, I'm not doing like a works cited for my posts. Like, so I'll just say, oh, our friends at Scholastic or our friends at the school district, like, and I always just try to like send people back to where it came from or mention where it came from. But with social media, I try not to get too hung up on it either, which probably isn't like the true librarian answer, but it kind of is the way social media is. So,
So Amanda from Fallsburg Library, she asked, do you include program tutorials in the 2 or 3 times a day? She's been doing craft tutorials on Facebook.
yeah. So, well, because I'm not in a library now, so I'm at the system level, but a lot of the libraries in our system, they'll schedule. So it would be like every Monday is going to be like the adult craft at this time. So they make it consistent. I think it would be really hard to get somebody to tune in to your Facebook page every single day for like to sit and like do a tutorial and to learn something every single day. So something like that, I would probably maybe only do once or twice a week. I think it's a really good way to get people out there, or to, even if you have a YouTube account, to like kind of drive them to your YouTube by posting these tutorials occasionally. I think it would be a lot of work with maybe not a lot of return to do it daily. So, I would definitely still use Facebook for it, but maybe again, like, Mondays is like adult craft day, Wednesdays is pajama story time, and then just having it very specific times of day, because although I'm addicted to social media and I'm on it all the time, not everybody is. So you'll be posting a lot of content that's missed, I think, if you're doing craft programs every day. And again, that's my personal opinion. So, but, and a lot of this is trial and error, but just from how I've seen people use it or some of our library's experiences.
Awesome. So Heather from the New Woodstock, you have a lot of questions. So
Whew. All right.
From the New Woodstock Free Library. Oh, someone wants to enter. Sorry. So Heather from the New Woodstock Free Library, she asks, do you post the same things on Facebook and Instagram, or do you use different content for each?
So our first post of the day is always the same across all 3 platforms. So that 8 a.m. post is going to be the same on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The rest of the day, I do try to vary it a little bit as to what's going to what, like what platform. Instagram, people just want to scroll and look at pictures. So stuff that's like you want people to link out to is really hard to put on Instagram. And that like is a whole thing. Like you should then maybe get a link tree and put that in your bio on Instagram. And that's probably like next step. Like maybe that will be next year's presentation. But so at Instagram, you primarily just want to put pictures up. So it's really good if like you're walking through your library and you have a display, snap it, throw it on Instagram. But for like, more like actionable items, that it's going to be like your Facebook and your Twitter, like links that you want people to click on, you know, information about like, you know, food banks in the area, or, you know, like programming, like all of that's probably going to go to those other platforms. And Instagram, you know, it's like a happy little library picture you throw up.
Nice, thank you. So Jesse from the Cohocton Public Library, how important are the passive engagements on Facebook compared to actual views?
Like the statistics in the back end?
Yeah.
You know, I don't even, yeah, I don't even pay that much attention to it. Like I'll look and I'll be like, oh, wow, this reached this many people. But then sometimes I'm like, well, reach, engagement, you know, like, yeah. For my purpose, you know, I'm just like, hey, did some people like this? Did this get shared? Then that was good enough for me, especially like if we have a community of 2,000 people, you know, maybe 1,000 people like us on Facebook and 12 people liked our post and 8 people shared it. To me, that was good. Or if somebody came into the library and was like, I saw this book display, I have to have this book. Like to me, that was more important than like what that graph was on Facebook. So I'll look at it, but you know what I really track each month is just how many like likes we have, like page likes, and how many followers we have. And that's what I really look at, because it is sometimes so arbitrary too. Like sometimes I'll post something that's so weird and like that gets a ton of engagements, but then like something I thought was like super amazing content like is widely ignored. So I try not to put too much stock into the back end statistics. And I'm like, what are like those immediate visible returns that we got from it? Did a new family come to Storytime? Success.
Awesome. So Elaine from the Tuckahoe Public Library asks, how much time does it take for you to create a post each day?
So I set aside 2 blocks of time to do my Facebook scheduling each week, or my social media scheduling each week. So usually like Monday afternoons, because like Monday morning is like, you have all those emails. So once things like settle down, I have like my third like snack of the day, then I'm like, all right, let's do some social media. So, and that's when I kind of like will create some stuff in Canva. And like, it's nice too, because it's a nice little break. It's like a creative break from like, you know, doing maybe like budgeting or policy work. So, you know, so I'll spend maybe a couple hours on like Monday, and I'll maybe create some stuff. I'll find some content, and then I'll schedule out our post for the next couple days. And then usually on Thursday afternoon, I'll come and I'll do like through the weekend. So I'll always post through Monday morning. So my Monday morning post, so that's not something I have to worry about Monday morning. Like that was taken care of on Thursday. And then, you know, Monday afternoon when I come on, then I'll do the next couple days. So I probably do, you know, it is a couple hours each week, but it's in 2 dedicated blocks of time. So it's not taking up like daily time from me. And sometimes it's really quick too. Like I know exactly what I'm going to post. Like as I'm scrolling through my own social media, if I see something I want to post, I screenshot a ton of stuff, and then I'll go through my phone and be like, what was that I wanted to post? The other thing I did was I downloaded the Pocket app, which I guess everyone else knew about but me, but it's great. So anytime you see a link that you like on your phone, you just like click the little arrowy thing at the bottom and you could put it in your pocket. And then later on, I could just go on from my desktop and grab those links and plug them into my Hootsuite scheduling. So if I saw like an article that would be really interesting to the library community, I just throw it in my pocket. And then later on when I'm doing my scheduling, so I'm not running right over to my computer and doing it now, I'm just saving it for later. So I'm just kind of throwing stuff in my queue. So then this way, when I do sit down and do my posting, it doesn't really take as long, but for me, it is. And I do post across 3 platforms, and they each get, you know, and Facebook gets 3 posts a day. So, you know, if you're only doing one platform and you're going to do 1 post a day, it's not going to take that much time for you. So it's all scalable, how much time you have, and how much time you want to dedicate to it as well.
Yeah, nice. So Tara from Haverstraw King's Daughters Public Library, just a clarification, you referenced something happening on January 1st. Can you go over that?
Oh, so minimum standards. So if you're not sure about minimum standards, if you just Google New York Public Libraries minimum standards, that website will come up. But there are an update to the New York Public and Association Libraries minimum standards starting January 1st, 2021. This came out 2 years ago, so we kind of had like 2 years to prep for it. But one of the stipulations in minimum standards is that your your public facing policies need to be on your library's website. So, your maybe your meeting room policy, your collection development policy, your programming policy, those things are going to need to be on your library's website by January 1st. And you need to have a website by January 1st. So those are minimum standards. Not a lot has changed, but a lot of stuff dealing with the library's website has. So you can check it out. If you're not sure, you can send me an email because I love to talk about minimum standards. I have a presentation for that too, but it's a little bit more dry, I think, than social media. So
thank you. So in these last few minutes, we have just 2 more questions.
Yeah.
We have Heather Johnson from William B. Ogden Free Library. How do you handle the messenger on Facebook? So she admin of her social media account. She gets messages from patrons during hours when she's away from the library on her time off. So how do you handle that?
All right, so this is where you're going to have to decide, number one, you're going to have to set those boundaries, and then you're going to have to decide what to do. So if it depends on what the question is. If I get it on off hours, I'll always respond, right? But it might just be oh, thank you so much for reaching out. We'll be in touch with you when the library opens Monday morning at 10 o'clock. So you can do that, and you can kind of just put them off a little bit. So, I see you, I hear you, and we're going to get to you during our normal operating hours. If it's an emergency situation, not that that's ever really happened that I can think of, but I will kind of, then maybe answer it there. But so that's what you need to think about too. If you have somebody managing your social media who is an hourly employee, then you have to think about if they're spending off hour times, maybe how you might compensate them for that. If they were oh, I answered social media questions for 1 hour on Saturday. So that might have to be something that you work out, or maybe you have your internal policy is how that's handled. But or you could even set up an automatic message to go to them. So you could say, again, somebody will be in touch with you tomorrow when the library opens at this time, and just so they know that somebody from the library saw it, they know that somebody from the library is going to get back to them, but it's not encroaching on your Saturday night, your Sunday, right? Because that's something too, the social media and email and that, immediate availability definitely has led to employee burnout, and not just in libraries, across all types of businesses. So, making sure that you have some sort of policy and procedures set in place for how you're going to handle those, and then make sure you're doing it. So, people aren't whoever's in charge of your social media, their whole Saturday isn't eaten up by people where's my book?
So. Right. And then our last question is from Melissa from Maxwell Memorial Library. Is there a time of day that is better to post things than others?
Again, it does take a little bit of trial and error for your community to see what works when they're online. When I was at Clifton Springs Library, I used to do 8, 12, 4, and 8. And my thinking was okay, so when everyone hit their desk in the morning, there was going to be a post, when they got to work at say 9. And then, I usually post around noon, because when we all come back from lunch, do we go to work right away, or do we check our social media? And then posting at 4, maybe when they got home at the end of the day. And then I felt like people sitting on the couch scrolling at night. So I kind of, always wanted to sprinkle the library throughout the day. 4 is a lot of posts though. So if you're doing 1, 2, 3, just I would experiment with different times. Maybe the next 2 weeks, I'm going to post at 9 o'clock every single day and 1 o'clock every single day. And let's just see how those do. So if you change it every single day, you're never going to have good data to decide from. So try something for 2 weeks. And if it works really well, okay, maybe that's your sweet spot that you found. And if nobody sees it, there's no likes, there's no engagements, maybe that's just not a good time for your community and how they're using social media.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. It was a good presentation. Everyone's super happy. Everyone has said that you're very entertaining and very informative as well. So,
well, my contact information is up. you know, I'm on Twitter personally, but my personal Twitter is full of nonsense and has nothing to do with libraries, but you're welcome to take a look. I put like more of the serious stuff on LinkedIn because I finally joined LinkedIn like a grown up. But, you know, if you want to take a look at some of the examples I talked about today, the Pioneer Library Systems Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter is up too. So you could take a look and, you know, check it out. And if there's any questions we didn't get to, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always willing to answer questions and, you know, so reach out.
Thank you so much. And also, just so everyone knows, this presentation was recorded. It'll be available after the conference right in the FieldView platform. And so will the slides will be included in the description and all the links that Suzanne mentioned. So awesome. Well, thank you all so much and have a great rest of conference. Bye.